On our family trip, my wife said she was tired. We didn't touch. In the middle of the night, I heard moans coming from my son-in-law's room. It was her voice. "He's getting dumber." They laughed. So I decided to play along a week later. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you are watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is John, and at 64 years old, I thought I knew everything there was to know about my family. I had been married to Margaret for 37 years, raised our daughter Sarah, and welcomed Vincent as our son-in-law with open arms. We were supposed to be the perfect family, the kind you see in holiday commercials. But that night at the lake house, everything I believed about my life crumbled in a matter of minutes. The trip was Margaret's idea. She had been insisting for months that we needed family time, that we were all growing apart. Sarah and Vincent had been married for 3 years, and Margaret kept saying we needed to bond more as a family. I agreed because I wanted to make her happy. I always wanted to make her happy. We rented this beautiful cabin overlooking Lake Tahoe for a long weekend in September. The fall colors were just starting to show, and the air had that crisp feeling that made everything seem perfect. I had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. Margaret had been distant lately, always tired, always stressed about something. I thought maybe getting away from everything would bring us closer together. The first day went well enough. We grilled burgers on the deck, played some card games, and talked about Sarah's new job at the marketing firm. Vincent was his usual charming self, making jokes and keeping everyone entertained. He had always been good at that, making people feel comfortable around him. That's probably why I trusted him so completely. But I noticed something that first evening. Margaret barely touched her food, and when I tried to hold her hand during our walk around the lake, she pulled away. She said she wasn't feeling well, that the altitude was getting to her. I believed her. I always believed her. That night, Margaret went to bed early. She said she had a headache and just needed to rest. I stayed up a little longer, reading a book by the fireplace, while Sarah and Vincent watched a movie. Around 10:30, they said their goodnights and went to their room, which was right next to ours in the small cabin. I went to bed around 11, careful not to wake Margaret. She was lying on her side, facing away from me, breathing evenly. I thought she was asleep. When I tried to put my arm around her, she mumbled something about being too tired and moved further away. It stung a little, but I figured she really was just exhausted from the drive and the change of environment. I must have dozed off around midnight when I heard it. At first I thought I was dreaming. There were sounds coming from the room next to ours, muffled voices, movement. The walls in the cabin were thin, and sound carried easily between the rooms. I lay there trying to figure out what it was when I heard something that made my blood run cold. It was Margaret's voice, not Sarah's. Margaret's. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I looked next to me, and the bed was empty. Margaret wasn't there. The bathroom door was open, and I could see it was dark inside. She wasn't there either. The sounds from the next room continued, and now I could make out voices more clearly. Margaret was talking to Vincent, but her voice was different, softer, intimate, the way she used to talk to me 20 years ago. I got out of bed as quietly as I could and moved closer to the wall that separated our rooms. What I heard next destroyed something inside me that I didn't even know existed. Margaret was laughing, but it wasn't her polite, social laugh. It was genuine, happy. Then I heard Vincent's voice, low and amused. "He really has no idea, does he?" Vincent said. Margaret's response hit me like a physical blow. "None at all. Sometimes I think he's getting dumber with age. It's actually pathetic how trusting he is." They both laughed then, and the sound felt like knives in my chest. I pressed my back against the wall, struggling to breathe quietly. They were talking about me. My wife and my son-in-law were talking about how stupid I was. "Sarah was right," Margaret continued. "This trip was perfect timing. He's so focused on trying to make me happy that he doesn't see anything else." Vincent said something I couldn't quite catch, and then Margaret responded with something that made my knees weak. "Don't worry about him. He goes to sleep early every night, and he's such a heavy sleeper. We have plenty of time." Plenty of time for what? But even as I asked myself the question, I already knew the answer. The sounds I had been hearing, the intimate conversation, Margaret's absence from our bed. It was all perfectly clear, even though my mind was desperately trying to find another explanation. I don't know how long I stood there against that wall, listening to my 37-year marriage dissolve into something ugly and unrecognizable. At some point I heard movement, and then Margaret's voice again. I should get back before he wakes up. Give it a few more minutes, Vincent said. You know how he is. Once he's asleep, nothing wakes him up. They were right about that too. I had always been a heavy sleeper. Margaret used to joke that she could vacuum the bedroom and I wouldn't wake up. Now they were using even that against me. I managed to get back to bed before Margaret returned. I lay there pretending to sleep as she slipped back under the covers. She smelled different, like cologne that wasn't mine. When she settled next to me, I had to bite my tongue to keep from saying something. The rest of the night was torture. I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I had heard. My wife was cheating on me with our son-in-law, our daughter's husband, and they both thought I was too stupid to figure it out. Every memory from the past few months started to make sense. Margaret's late nights at book club, Vincent's frequent visits to our house when Sarah was working, the way they sometimes stopped talking when I walked into a room, the inside jokes I never understood. All of it had been right in front of me, and I had been too trusting, too naive to see it. When morning came, Margaret acted completely normal. She made coffee, chatted about what we should do that day, and even kissed my cheek when she handed me my mug. Vincent was his usual charming self at breakfast, asking me about my golf game and telling stories about his law firm. I sat there watching them, amazed at how easily they could pretend, how naturally they could lie. Margaret even complained about not sleeping well because of the thin walls, saying she heard noises all night. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Sarah seemed oblivious to everything. She was excited about the hiking trail she wanted us to try, chattering about the photos she wanted to take. I looked at my daughter and wondered if she knew. Was she part of this too, or was she as clueless as I had been? The rest of the trip passed in a haze. I went through the motions, smiled when I was supposed to smile, laughed at Vincent's jokes, and pretended everything was normal. But inside, something fundamental had broken. Every time Margaret touched my arm or Vincent called me Dad, I felt sick. On our last night, I made sure to go to bed early and pretend to fall asleep quickly. And just like the first night, Margaret slipped out after she thought I was unconscious. This time I didn't get up to listen. I didn't need to hear anymore. The drive home was the longest 4 hours of my life. Margaret sat next to me, talking about what a wonderful time we'd had, how we should do it more often. Vincent and Sarah chatted in the back seat about work and their plans for the week. Everything seemed so normal, so perfect, but I knew the truth now. My marriage was a lie. My family was a lie. And everyone seemed to think I was too stupid to figure it out. As we pulled into our driveway, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to make a scene. I was going to be smarter than they thought I was. I was going to figure out exactly how deep this betrayal went, and then I was going to decide what to do about it. They thought I was getting dumber with age. They had no idea what was coming. The first week back from the lake house was the most difficult week of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal while my entire world had shifted on its axis. Every morning I made coffee for Margaret and me, just like I had for 37 years. Every evening I asked her about her day and listened to her talk about book club and her volunteer work at the church. But now I was listening for lies, and I was finding them everywhere. Margaret had always been good at keeping secrets, but I had never looked for them before. Now that I was paying attention, the signs were impossible to miss. She would check her phone constantly and quickly put it away when I walked into the room. She started taking longer showers and using a new perfume she claimed was a gift from her sister Linda. On Wednesday morning, 3 days after we got back, Margaret announced she was going grocery shopping. She kissed my cheek and said she might stop by Sarah's afterward to drop off some leftovers. The casual way she said it made my stomach clench. Was this another lie? After she left, I did something I had never done in 37 years of marriage. I went through her things. I started with her purse, which she had left on the kitchen counter. My hands were shaking as I opened it, feeling like a criminal in my own home. Inside, beneath her wallet and reading glasses, I found a small piece of paper with a phone number written on it. The handwriting was Vincent's. I had seen it enough times on birthday cards and thank you notes to recognize it immediately. My heart was pounding as I memorized the number. It wasn't his work number or his cell phone. I knew both of those by heart. This was something else, something secret, I put everything back exactly as I found it and went to my office. My hands were trembling as I dialed the number from my desk phone. Riverside Motel. A woman's voice answered. How can I help you? I hung up without saying anything. A motel. They were meeting at a motel. The rest of that day passed in a blur. When Margaret came home, she was humming softly and seemed unusually happy. She had bought flowers for the kitchen table and made my favorite pot roast for dinner. The guilt must have been eating at her, I thought, or maybe she was just happy about seeing Vincent. That evening, while Margaret was in the shower, I checked our cell phone bill online. We had a family plan that included Sarah and Vincent's phones, and I had access to all the usage details. What I found made me feel sick. Over the past 3 months, Margaret had exchanged hundreds of text messages with Vincent. Not just a few here and there, but constant communication. Sometimes 20 or 30 messages in a single day. And many of the calls were late at night, after I had gone to bed. I printed out the phone records and hid them in my desk drawer. The evidence was mounting, but I still didn't know how long this had been going on or how involved Sarah was. The next day, Margaret said she was going to book club. It was Thursday, which was her usual book club night, so I didn't think anything of it at first, but then I remembered the motel phone number. After she left, I drove to the parking lot, across from the library where her book club met. Margaret's car wasn't there. I sat in my car for 20 minutes watching the entrance, but she never showed up. I drove to the Riverside Motel. It was a rundown place on the edge of town, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour. I parked where I could see the parking lot, but stayed far enough away that I wouldn't be spotted. Vincent's car was there, so was Margaret's. I sat in my car for 2 hours, feeling like my heart was being carved out of my chest with a dull knife. This wasn't just a moment of weakness or a mistake. This was deliberate, ongoing, planned. They had been meeting here regularly while I sat at home thinking my wife was discussing novels with her friends. When they finally emerged from the motel, I watched my wife of 37 years kiss another man in the parking lot. Not a quick peck, but a real kiss, passionate and intimate. The kind of kiss we used to share when we were young. I drove home and was sitting in my chair reading when Margaret walked in at 10:15. How was book club? I asked, not looking up from my book. Oh, you know how it is, she said, hanging up her coat. Linda talked too much about the characters' motivations, and Janet disagreed with everything. We barely got through chapter 12. She was so good at lying, so smooth and natural. I wondered how long she had been practicing. What book are you reading? I asked. She paused for just a second too long. Pride and Prejudice. I know we've read it before, but Sandra thought it would be good to revisit the classics. I nodded and went back to my book, but I made a mental note to check what book they were actually discussing. I had a feeling Margaret had no idea. Over the weekend, Vincent and Sarah came over for Sunday dinner, just like they did every week. Vincent helped me fix a loose board on the deck while Sarah and Margaret prepared the meal. As we worked together, he asked about my golf game and told me about a case he was working on at the law firm. He seemed so genuine, so concerned about my life and my interests. The whole time I kept thinking about him kissing my wife in that motel parking lot. During dinner, Margaret mentioned that she had signed up to help with the church's charity auction next month. She would be spending several evenings organizing donations and preparing displays. That sounds like a lot of work, Sarah said. Will you need help? Oh, no, dear, Margaret replied. Vincent actually offered to help me with some of the heavier items. Isn't that sweet of him? Vincent nodded earnestly. I'm happy to help, Margaret. Family takes care of family. I almost choked on my food. The audacity of it was breathtaking. They were planning their next round of secret meetings right in front of me and Sarah, using charity work as their cover. Sarah beamed at her husband. You're so thoughtful, honey. Mom, you're lucky to have such a helpful son-in-law. Yes, Margaret said, reaching over to pat Vincent's hand. I'm very lucky. The way she looked at him when she said it made my stomach turn. There was nothing motherly about that look. After they left, I helped Margaret clean up the dishes. She was humming again, that soft, happy sound that used to make me smile. Now it made me want to break something. Vincent really is a wonderful young man, she said as she loaded the dishwasher. Sarah is so lucky to have found him. I agreed, not trusting myself to say more. He reminds me of you when you were younger, she continued. so caring and attentive. The comparison made me feel physically ill. Was she really going to stand in our kitchen and compare me to the man she was cheating with? That night I lay in bed listening to Margaret breathe next to me. She fell asleep quickly, like she always did. No guilt was keeping her awake. No remorse was making her toss and turn. She was sleeping peacefully after lying to my face all evening. I stared at the ceiling and tried to figure out my next move. I could confront them, but what would that accomplish? They would just deny everything or make excuses. I could file for divorce, but after 37 years of marriage, Margaret would be entitled to half of everything I had worked for. Or I could keep investigating, find out exactly how long this had been going on and whether Sarah knew about it. Get all the facts before I made any decisions. On Monday morning, I called the library and asked about the book club schedule. The librarian was very helpful. She told me that the Thursday evening book club had been suspended for the month due to renovations in the meeting room. They wouldn't resume until the first week of November. Margaret had been lying about book club for at least a month, maybe longer. I spent the rest of the week watching and listening. I paid attention to every phone call, every text message, every excuse to leave the house. The pattern was clear once I knew what to look for. Book club on Thursday nights, charity work on Saturday afternoons, grocery shopping that took 3 hours, visiting her sister Linda who lived 40 minutes away. Every excuse was reasonable, believable, and completely false. By Friday I had enough evidence to prove the affair, but I had a terrible feeling that this was just the beginning. The way they had talked about me at the lake house, calling me stupid and gullible, suggested something bigger, something worse. I needed to know what they were really planning. Saturday morning, Margaret announced she was going to Linda's house to help her organize her closet. She would probably be gone most of the day. After she left, I did something that felt both necessary and horrible. I searched our bedroom. In Margaret's jewelry box, tucked behind her pearl earrings, I found a key I didn't recognize. It was small, like a safe deposit box key. We had one safe deposit box at First National Bank, and I had both keys to that one. This was something else, something secret. I put the key back and continued searching. In her nightstand drawer, beneath some old magazines, I found a manila envelope. Inside were documents I didn't understand at first. Bank statements for accounts I had never seen, insurance papers with beneficiary information that had been changed without my knowledge, and at the bottom of the envelope, a business card for a private investigator. My hands were shaking as I read the investigator's name and phone number. Why would Margaret need a private investigator? What was she investigating? Then I found the notes written in Margaret's handwriting. Pages of information about my daily routine, my health appointments, my medications, my business dealings. She had been documenting everything about my life in meticulous detail. At the bottom of the last page, in Margaret's careful script, were the words that made everything clear. Memory issues becoming more pronounced, confusion about dates and appointments increasing. May need medical evaluation soon. I sat on our bed holding those papers, finally understanding what was happening. Margaret wasn't just cheating on me with Vincent. She was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent. They thought I was getting dumber with age, but they were helping that process along. They were documenting fake evidence of my mental decline, probably to gain control of my finances and medical decisions. The betrayal was so much deeper than I had imagined. This wasn't just about sex or even love. This was about money, power, and control. As I put everything back exactly where I found it, one thought kept running through my mind. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I might be 64 years old, but my mind was as sharp as ever. And now I knew exactly what they were planning. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The weekend after discovering Margaret's notes about my supposed mental decline, I knew I had to dig deeper. The private investigator's business card in her drawer haunted me. What exactly were they investigating? And how long had this conspiracy been in motion? On Monday morning, Margaret left for what she claimed was a doctor's appointment. She had been making a lot of medical appointments lately, which I now realized was probably part of their plan to establish some kind of medical record. After she left, I called the private investigator whose card I had found. "Davidson Investigations," a gruff male voice answered. "Yes, I'm calling about an investigation you're conducting for Margaret Holloway," I said, trying to sound authoritative. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't discuss active cases over the phone. You'll need to come in with proper identification and authorization." "This is regarding my own case," I said. "I'm John Holloway, Margaret's husband." There was a long pause. "Sir, according to my files, you're not authorized to receive information about this investigation. The client specifically requested that all information be kept confidential from you." My stomach dropped. "I see, thank you." I hung up, my hands shaking. That they had hired a private investigator to investigate me, and they had specifically requested that I be kept in the dark. What were they trying to find? Or worse, what were they trying to prove? That afternoon I did something I never thought I would do. I drove to Sarah's office downtown. She worked at a marketing firm in a glass building that always made me feel out of place. I told the receptionist I wanted to surprise my daughter and asked if I could wait in the lobby until she had a break. 20 minutes later, Sarah appeared, looking surprised but pleased to see me. "Dad, what are you doing here?" She hugged me tightly, and for a moment I almost believed she was innocent in all this. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd take my daughter to lunch," I said. "Are you free?" Her face lit up. "Of course. Let me just grab my purse." We went to a small cafe around the corner, and I watched my daughter carefully as we talked. She seemed genuinely happy to see me, chatting about her work and asking about my golf game. But I noticed she checked her phone several times, and once she stepped away to take a call that she said was from Vincent. After we ordered, I decided to test her. "How are things with you and Vincent?" I asked. "You two seem really happy." "We are," she said, smiling. "He's been so supportive lately, especially with Mom going through her rough patch." I frowned. "What rough patch?" Sarah's expression changed slightly, and I caught a glimpse of something calculating in her eyes. "Oh, she's been worried about you lately." "Worried about me?" "Dad." Sarah leaned forward, her voice gentle but concerned. "We've all noticed that you've been a little forgetful recently. Missing appointments, getting confused about dates. Mom's been really stressed about it." The lies came so easily to her. I realized that my own daughter had been practicing this conversation, probably coached by Margaret and Vincent. "I haven't been forgetful," I said carefully. Sarah gave me a sad smile. "That's part of the problem, Dad. People with memory issues often don't realize they're having them. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It happens to lots of people as they get older." I felt a chill run down my spine. She was already laying the groundwork, planting seeds of doubt about my mental state. How long had they been planning this? "Has your mother talked to you about this?" I asked. "A little," Sarah admitted. "She's been documenting some incidents, just so she can talk to your doctor about them. Vincent thinks it might be a good idea to have you evaluated, just to be safe." There it was. Vincent was involved in the medical conspiracy too, probably using his legal expertise to help them build a case for incompetency. "What kind of incidents?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Sarah looked uncomfortable. "Well, like last month when you forgot about dinner at our house. We waited for 2 hours before Mom called you, and you seemed confused about what day it was." I remembered that evening clearly. Margaret had told me dinner was cancelled because Sarah wasn't feeling well. I had never forgotten about any dinner. They were creating false incidents, manufacturing evidence of my mental decline. "And Vincent noticed that you seemed disoriented at the lake house," Sarah continued. "You kept asking the same questions and seemed confused about the sleeping arrangements." This was getting worse by the minute. Vincent had been taking notes too, documenting fake evidence to support their case. The sleeping arrangements comment was particularly cruel since I had been completely oriented that night, oriented enough to discover their affair. "I see," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. "And what does Vincent think should be done?" "He thinks we need to be proactive," Sarah said. "Maybe talk to a specialist, get some tests done. He's actually researched some excellent facilities that specialize in memory care." Memory care facilities? They weren't just planning to have me declared incompetent, they were planning to have me institutionalized. The rest of lunch passed in a blur. Sarah continued to express her concern for my well-being while subtly reinforcing the narrative that I was losing my mental faculties. She was good at it, almost as good as Margaret. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. As I drove home, I tried to process what I had learned. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. This was a coordinated effort involving my wife, my son-in-law, and my daughter to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could gain control of my assets and my life. The timeline was becoming clearer. The affair between Margaret and Vincent was probably the catalyst, but the financial conspiracy had grown from there. With me out of the way, they could access my retirement accounts, my life insurance, and the house. Margaret would be my legal guardian, able to make all decisions about my care and my money. That evening, Margaret came home from her supposed doctor's appointment looking tired but satisfied. She had that same expression she used to get when she finished a particularly challenging project. "How was your appointment?" I asked. "Oh, fine," she said vaguely. "Just routine blood work." I knew she was lying. The doctor's office she claimed to visit was in the same building as the private investigator. I had checked. After dinner, Vincent called. Margaret took the call in the kitchen, speaking in low tones. I pretended to watch television, but strained to hear the conversation. "Yes, he seemed fine today," she was saying. "Sarah talked to him at lunch, and she said he responded well to the suggestions." There was a pause while Vincent spoke. "No, I don't think he suspects anything yet," Margaret continued. "The incidents we've documented should be enough to establish a pattern. Dr. Harrison thinks we can move forward with the evaluation next week." Dr. Harrison. Another name to investigate. "Vincent, honey, I know this is hard." Margaret's voice had taken on that intimate tone I had heard at the lake house. "But it's necessary. He can't take care of himself much longer, and this way we can make sure he gets the care he needs." The hypocrisy was staggering. They were going to destroy my life and tell themselves they were doing it for my own good. After Margaret hung up, she came back to the living room and sat next to me on the couch. She even took my hand, stroking it gently. "John, I've been thinking," she said softly. "Maybe we should schedule you for a physical. It's been a while, and I want to make sure you're taking care of yourself." "I feel fine," I said. "I know, honey, but prevention is important, especially at our age." She squeezed my hand. "I worry about you." The concern in her voice sounded so genuine. If I hadn't overheard her phone conversation, I might have believed her. "What kind of physical?" I asked. "Just the usual tests. Maybe some cognitive assessments, too. Dr. Harrison is excellent with older patients. He specializes in age-related health issues." There was Dr. Harrison again. The pieces were falling into place. "Okay," I said. "If it makes you feel better." Margaret smiled and kissed my cheek. "It would. I love you, John. I just want what's best for you." The lies were flowing so easily now that I wondered if she even remembered what the truth looked like. That night I lay awake thinking about my daughter's involvement in this conspiracy. The affair between Margaret and Vincent was devastating enough, but Sarah's participation felt like a deeper betrayal. She was my child, my little girl. I had taught her to ride a bike, helped her with homework, walked her down the aisle on her wedding day. Now she was actively working to have me declared mentally incompetent. The next morning I made a decision. I needed to understand exactly how deep this went and who else might be involved. I called in sick to my part-time consulting job and spent the day conducting my own investigation. First, I drove to Dr. Harrison's office. It was in a medical complex downtown, and according to the directory, he specialized in geriatric psychiatry and competency evaluations. I sat in the parking lot and watched the building for an hour. Margaret's car never appeared, but I wanted to get a feel for the place where they planned to have me evaluated. Next, I went to the courthouse and looked up Vincent's name in the public records. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 6 months, Vincent had been researching guardianship laws and had requested copies of several competency hearing transcripts. He had been studying how to have someone declared mentally incompetent. But the worst discovery came when I searched for recent property transfers. 3 weeks ago, Margaret had quietly transferred the deed to our house into a trust that named Vincent as the successor trustee in case of my incapacity. Our house? The home I had worked 30 years to pay off. She had already signed it away, probably with Vincent's legal guidance. I sat in my car outside the courthouse, feeling like the ground was disappearing beneath me. They weren't just planning to have me declared incompetent. They had already started moving my assets out of my control. That afternoon I did something that felt both necessary and heartbreaking. I hired my own private investigator. James Morrison came highly recommended and specialized in family investigations. He was about 50, with graying hair and kind eyes that had probably seen every form of human betrayal imaginable. I told him everything. About the affair, about the conspiracy, about the false documentation of my mental decline. He listened without judgment, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. "How long do you think this has been going on?" he asked. "The affair may be 6 months," I said. "But the financial conspiracy feels more recent, maybe 3 or 4 months. And your daughter is definitely involved." I nodded, my throat tight. "She's been helping them build the case for my incompetency, creating false incidents, coaching conversations." Morrison was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Holloway, I have to ask this directly. Do you have any actual memory or cognitive issues?" "None," I said firmly. "I'm 64 years old, but my mind is sharp. I remember everything clearly, including details they think I've forgotten." "Good," he said, "because what they're doing is not just morally reprehensible, it's illegal. If we can prove conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse, there could be serious legal consequences for all of them." For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't just the victim in this story anymore. I was going to fight back. "What do you need from me?" I asked. Morrison smiled grimly. "Everything you've told me, plus whatever evidence you can safely gather. And, Mr. Holloway, don't let them know you're onto them. The element of surprise is going to be crucial when we expose what they've been doing." I shook his hand and left his office feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Powerful. They thought they were dealing with a confused old man who was losing his mind. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. The hardest thing about the next few weeks wasn't discovering the depth of my family's betrayal. It was pretending to be the confused, declining man they needed me to be while secretly gathering evidence to destroy their plans. James Morrison had given me a small recording device and taught me how to use it without detection. He also provided me with a secure email account that Margaret couldn't access. Every day I documented new evidence of their conspiracy while playing the role of a man losing his mind. It was Margaret who gave me the idea for how to handle the situation. During one of our monitored phone conversations that Morrison was recording, she told Vincent that I was becoming more manageable and less suspicious as my supposed condition worsened. They wanted a docile, confused John who wouldn't question their decisions or notice their lies. So, that's exactly what I gave them. The morning after my meeting with Morrison, Margaret announced that she had made an appointment with Dr. Harrison for the following week. She said it with that same fake concern in her voice that I had learned to recognize. "I think it's time, John," she said, sitting next to me at the breakfast table. "You've been having more episodes lately, and I'm worried." "Episodes?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Yesterday you asked me 3 times what day it was," she said gently. "And last week you forgot that we were supposed to have dinner with the Hendersons." I hadn't asked about the day, and we had never planned dinner with the Hendersons, but I needed to start playing along. "I don't remember asking about the day," I said, letting a note of confusion creep into my voice. Margaret's face showed what looked like sympathy, but I caught the satisfied gleam in her eyes. "That's exactly what I'm worried about, honey. Sometimes people with memory issues don't remember having memory issues." She was coaching me into accepting their narrative. Every conversation was designed to make me doubt my own recollections and accept their version of events. "Maybe you're right," I said reluctantly. "I have been feeling a little confused lately." The relief on Margaret's face was unmistakable. She thought she was winning. That afternoon, Vincent stopped by the house while Margaret was supposedly at the grocery store. I knew from Morrison's surveillance that she was actually at the Riverside Motel, but I pretended not to know. "Hey, Dad," Vincent said, settling into the chair across from me in the living room. "Margaret asked me to check on you. She's worried about you being alone." "I'm fine," I said, but I made my voice sound slightly uncertain. Vincent studied my face carefully. "She mentioned that you've been having some confusion lately. Memory issues." "Have I?" I asked, letting myself sound genuinely worried. "I don't think so, but Margaret keeps saying..." It's nothing to be ashamed of, Vincent said smoothly. It happens to a lot of people as they age. The important thing is getting proper care. What kind of care? Vincent leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. Well, first we need to get you properly evaluated. Dr. Harrison is excellent. He'll run some tests, assess your cognitive function, and help us understand what kind of support you might need. Support? Sometimes people with memory issues need help managing their daily activities, Vincent explained. Financial decisions, medical choices, that sort of thing. It's actually a blessing to catch these things early so we can put proper safeguards in place. Safeguards? Legal mechanisms that would give them control over my life. Who would help me with those things? I asked innocently. Margaret, of course. She's your wife and closest family member. Legally, she would be the best person to serve as your guardian if it comes to that. There it was. The endgame laid out clearly. Margaret would become my legal guardian, able to make all decisions about my money, my medical care, and my living situation. And you'd help her? I asked. Vincent smiled warmly. Of course, Dad. Family takes care of family. Sarah and I would do whatever we could to support Margaret in taking care of you. The way he said taking care of you made my skin crawl. They weren't planning to take care of me. They were planning to warehouse me somewhere while they spent my money and lived their secret life together. After Vincent left, I went to my office and called Morrison. They're moving faster than we thought, I told him. The appointment with Dr. Harrison is next week, and Vincent basically outlined their whole plan for guardianship. Good, Morrison said. We're getting everything on tape. How are you handling the emotional aspect of this? It was a fair question. Discovering that your wife, daughter, and son-in-law were conspiring to steal your life wasn't exactly easy to process. Some days I feel angry, I admitted. Other days I just feel sad. 37 years of marriage, and it comes down to this. What you're doing takes incredible strength, Morrison said. Not many people could maintain this kind of facade while gathering evidence. I keep thinking about my daughter, I said. I understand why Margaret and Vincent are doing this. They're in love, or at least they think they are, and they want to be together. But Sarah, she's helping them destroy her own father. Some people will do anything for money, Morrison said quietly, even betray their own family. That evening Sarah came over for dinner. It was a regular Tuesday night, nothing special, but I watched her differently now. She hugged me when she arrived, asked about my day, and seemed genuinely concerned when I mentioned feeling a little foggy lately. During dinner, she brought up the upcoming appointment with Dr. Harrison. Mum told me you're finally going to see a specialist, she said. I think that's really smart, Dad. Do you think I need to see someone? I asked. Sarah exchanged a quick glance with Margaret. I just think it's good to be proactive. You've seemed a little confused lately, and there are treatments that can help if we catch things early. What kind of confused? Well, remember last month when you called me at work asking if we still had plans for dinner? We had cancelled those plans the week before. Another fabricated incident. I had never called her about dinner plans because there hadn't been any dinner plans to cancel. I don't remember calling you, I said, which was true. That's what I mean, Dad, Sarah said gently. Sometimes you don't remember things that just happened. Margaret reached over and patted my hand. It's going to be okay, honey. We're going to make sure you get the help you need. The three of us continued eating in what they probably thought was comfortable family silence. But I was thinking about the recording device in my shirt pocket, capturing every word of their careful manipulation. After dinner, Sarah helped Margaret with the dishes while I sat in the living room. I could hear them talking quietly in the kitchen, and I strained to catch their words. How do you think he's doing? Sarah asked. Better than I expected, Margaret replied. He's starting to accept that there might be a problem. Vincent thinks the appointment with Dr. Harrison will go smoothly. And after that? Dr. Harrison will recommend a more comprehensive evaluation. Vincent has research facilities that specialize in memory care. Some of them are quite nice. Mum, are you sure about this? I mean, what if Dad gets better? What if it's just stress or something treatable? There was a long pause. For a moment I hoped my daughter might be having second thoughts. "Sarah," Margaret's voice was firm, "your father is 64 years old. Even if his memory problems are treatable, he's not going to live forever. This arrangement protects everyone, the house, his retirement accounts, his life insurance. If we don't plan ahead, half of everything could end up going to lawyers and nursing home costs." "I know, but sometimes I feel guilty about..." "About what? Taking care of your inheritance? Making sure your children have something to inherit someday? Sarah, we're not doing anything wrong. We're planning for the inevitable." My daughter's response chilled me to the bone. "You're right. I just needed to hear you say it. Vincent explained the legal aspects to me, and it all makes sense. This is the responsible thing to do." They came back to the living room, and Sarah gave me another hug before leaving. "I love you, Dad," she said, looking directly into my eyes. "I love you too, sweetheart," I replied, and meant it despite everything. That was the tragedy of all this. I did still love my daughter, even though she was actively participating in destroying my life. The woman who used to bring me dandelions when she was 5 and called me her hero was now helping to steal my freedom and dignity. The next few days passed in a careful dance of deception. Margaret continued her fake medical appointments and charity work while meeting Vincent at the motel. I continued playing the role of a confused man, slowly accepting his declining mental state while secretly documenting every lie they told. Morrison's surveillance was thorough. He had photos of Margaret and Vincent entering and leaving the motel. He had recordings of their phone conversations discussing my supposed symptoms. He had documented their meetings with Dr. Harrison and the private investigator they had hired to build their case. Most damning of all, he had obtained copies of the legal documents Vincent had prepared. Papers that would make Margaret my legal guardian and give her complete control over my finances and medical decisions. Documents that described me as suffering from progressive dementia and requiring immediate intervention for my own safety. The irony wasn't lost on me. They thought they were playing chess while I was stuck playing checkers. In reality, I was several moves ahead of them, and they had no idea what was coming. 3 days before my appointment with Dr. Harrison, Morrison called with news that changed everything. "We found something interesting," he said. "The private investigator Margaret hired, he's been investigating you, but not for the reasons you might think." "What do you mean?" "They hired him to research your family history, specifically looking for any documented cases of dementia or Alzheimer's disease in your relatives. They're trying to establish a genetic predisposition to memory problems." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Did they find anything?" "Nothing significant. Your father died of a heart attack at 78 with no memory issues. Your mother lived to 86 and was sharp as a tack until the end. But here's the interesting part. They've been paying this investigator to falsify his report." "Falsify it how?" "They want him to document a family history of early onset dementia that doesn't actually exist. Medical records that show your father and grandfather both suffered from progressive memory loss." The conspiracy was even deeper than I had imagined. They weren't just creating false evidence of my current symptoms. They were manufacturing a false family medical history to support their claims. "Can you prove this?" I asked. "We have it all on tape. The investigator agreed to cooperate with us in exchange for immunity. Apparently, he's not comfortable with falsifying medical records." I felt a surge of hope mixed with rage. They had been so thorough, so calculated in their planning. But their thoroughness was also going to be their downfall. "What happens now?" I asked. "We let them proceed with their plan," Morrison said. "Let them think they're winning. The appointment with Dr. Harrison, the competency evaluation, all of it. The more evidence we gather of their conspiracy, the stronger our case becomes. And then we expose everything, all at once when they least expect it." I hung up the phone and sat in my office thinking about the 3 people I had loved most in the world. My wife of 37 years who was cheating on me and planning to have me institutionalized. My daughter who was helping to orchestrate the theft of my freedom and dignity. And my son-in-law who was using his legal expertise to destroy my life while pretending to care about my well-being. They had no idea that their victim was fighting back, but they were about to find out. The morning of my appointment with Dr. Harrison, I woke up before dawn. Margaret was still sleeping next to me, looking peaceful and innocent. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have thought she was just a concerned wife worried about her aging husband. Instead, I was looking at a woman who had spent months planning to steal my life. I made coffee and sat in the kitchen, watching the sunrise through the window. Today was the day they thought they would win. Dr. Harrison would conduct his evaluation, find the cognitive decline they had so carefully documented, and recommend guardianship proceedings. Margaret would become my legal guardian, Vincent would help her manage my affairs, and I would disappear into some memory care facility while they lived happily ever after with my money. But James Morrison and I had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Every lie they had told, every false document they had created, every conversation they thought was private. We had it all documented. Today wasn't the beginning of the end for me. It was the beginning of the end for them. Margaret came into the kitchen an hour later, already dressed and looking nervous. "How are you feeling about today?" she asked, pouring herself coffee. "A little scared," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. I was scared, but not for the reasons she thought. "There's nothing to be scared of, honey," she said, sitting next to me. "Dr. Harrison is very kind, and this is just to help us understand what's going on." "What if something is really wrong with me?" I asked, letting my voice shake slightly. Margaret reached over and squeezed my hand. "Then we'll deal with it together. Whatever happens, I'll take care of you, I promise." The irony was suffocating. She was promising to take care of me while planning to destroy me. An hour before our appointment, Vincent arrived at the house. He was dressed in his best suit and carried a briefcase, looking every inch the successful lawyer. "Ready for this?" he asked Margaret, kissing her cheek in what looked like a supportive family gesture but lingered just a moment too long. "I think so," she said. "John seems resigned to the idea that there might be a problem." Vincent looked at me with what appeared to be genuine concern. "How are you doing, Dad? Nervous?" "A little," I said. "But Margaret says Dr. Harrison is nice." "He is," Vincent assured me. "And remember, this is just an evaluation. We're trying to help you, not hurt you." The lies came so easily to him. He had probably been practicing this compassionate act for weeks. We drove to Dr. Harrison's office in Vincent's car. Margaret sat in the front passenger seat, and I sat in the back like a child being taken to the doctor by his parents. During the drive, I listened to them discuss my symptoms and their concerns about my safety living alone. "He left the stove on yesterday," Margaret told Vincent. "I found it still burning when I came home from the store." I had never left the stove on. This was another fabricated incident for Dr. Harrison's benefit. "That's definitely a safety concern," Vincent replied. "We might need to start thinking about supervised living sooner than we planned." They were already discussing placing me in a facility, and the evaluation hadn't even begun. Dr. Harrison's office was in a modern medical building downtown. The waiting room was designed to be calming, with soft colors and nature photography on the walls. We checked in with the receptionist, and I noticed Vincent handed her an envelope that was probably full of the false documentation they had prepared. "The family wants to make sure Dr. Harrison has all the background information," Vincent explained to me quietly. 20 minutes later, a nurse called my name. Margaret started to get up to accompany me, but Dr. Harrison appeared and gently suggested that he speak with me alone first. "I like to get the patient's perspective before talking to family members," he explained. This wasn't part of their plan. Margaret looked uncomfortable, but she couldn't object without seeming suspicious. Dr. Harrison was a distinguished man in his 60s with kind eyes and a warm smile. His office was filled with books and had a window overlooking the city. He gestured for me to sit in a comfortable leather chair while he sat behind his desk. "Mr. Holloway, thank you for coming in today," he said. "I understand your family has some concerns about memory issues." "Yes," I said, playing my role. "My wife says I've been forgetting things." "Can you tell me about these memory problems, in your own words?" This was the crucial moment. I could continue playing the confused victim, or I could reveal the truth. Morrison had prepared me for this decision. "Dr. Harrison," I said, my voice suddenly clear and strong, "I need to tell you something important. I don't have any memory problems. My family is trying to have me declared mentally incompetent so they can steal my money." Dr. Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly, but his expression remained professional. "That's a very serious allegation, Mr. Holloway." I know it sounds crazy, I said, but I have proof. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small recording device. Everything I'm about to tell you is documented. My wife is having an affair with my son-in-law, and together with my daughter, they've been fabricating evidence of cognitive decline for months. Dr. Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying my face carefully. Mr. Holloway, I need to ask you some questions to assess your mental state. Are you hearing voices? Do you feel like people are plotting against you? I know how this sounds, I said calmly, but paranoia and reality can look very similar from the outside. The difference is evidence. I spent the next 30 minutes laying out everything I had discovered. The affair, the false incidents, the forged family medical history, the property transfers, and the legal documents Vincent had prepared. I played portions of recorded conversations where Margaret and Vincent discussed their plans. Dr. Harrison listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Holloway, he said finally, I've been conducting competency evaluations for 20 years. What you've described is not the presentation of someone with cognitive decline or paranoid delusions. Your memory is clearly intact, your reasoning is sound, and your emotional responses are appropriate to the situation. Relief flooded through me. So you believe me? I believe you're competent to make your own decisions, he said carefully. As for the allegations against your family, that's beyond my expertise. But I can tell you that nothing in your presentation today suggests you need guardianship or supervised care. What happens now? Dr. Harrison considered this. I'm going to conduct a formal cognitive assessment to document your mental state. Then I'll speak with your family and explain my findings. But, Mr. Holloway, if what you've told me is true, you need legal representation immediately. I already have it, I said. My investigator is working with an attorney. We've been building a case for weeks. Dr. Harrison nodded approvingly. Good, because what they've attempted to do to you is not just morally reprehensible, it's criminal. The formal assessment took another hour. Dr. Harrison tested my memory, reasoning, problem-solving abilities, and emotional stability. I performed normally on every test, scoring well above average for my age group. When we were finished, Dr. Harrison called Margaret and Vincent into his office. They entered looking expectant, probably anticipating confirmation of my supposed decline. Thank you both for bringing Mr. Holloway in today, Dr. Harrison began. I've completed my evaluation. And? Margaret asked, her voice tight with anticipation. Mr. Holloway shows no signs of cognitive impairment, dementia, or any other mental health condition that would affect his ability to make independent decisions. The silence in the room was deafening. Margaret's face went pale and Vincent's confident expression cracked. But the incidents we documented, Margaret started. I've reviewed your documentation, Dr. Harrison said, his tone becoming cooler. And I've spoken with Mr. Holloway at length about these alleged incidents. His recollection of events differs significantly from yours. Vincent leaned forward, his lawyer instincts kicking in. Doctor, sometimes patients with early cognitive decline don't recognize or remember their symptoms. That's true, Dr. Harrison agreed. But Mr. Holloway's cognitive function is excellent. His memory is intact, his reasoning is sound, and he shows no signs of confusion or disorientation. So, what are you saying? Margaret asked, her voice barely a whisper. I'm saying your husband doesn't need guardianship, supervised care, or any other intervention. He's perfectly capable of managing his own affairs. The room fell silent again. I watched my wife and son-in-law absorb the fact that their carefully constructed plan had just collapsed. There must be some mistake, Vincent said. We have months of documented incidents. Yes, Dr. Harrison said, his voice becoming stern. I'd be very interested to know how those incidents were documented and by whom. Margaret stood up abruptly. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We should go. Actually, I said, speaking for the first time since they entered the room, I think we should clear up this misunderstanding right here. They both turned to look at me, and for the first time in months they weren't looking at a confused old man they could manipulate. They were looking at someone who knew exactly what they had been doing. Sit down, Margaret, I said quietly. "We need to talk." The fear in her eyes was unmistakable. Vincent reached for her arm, but she shook him off and sat back down. "Dr. Harrison," I said, "would it be possible for us to have some privacy?" "Of course. I'll be in the outer office if you need anything." After he left, the three of us sat in silence for a moment. Margaret was staring at her hands, and Vincent was watching me with the expression of a lawyer who had just realized his case was falling apart. "How long have you known?" Margaret asked finally. "Since the lake house," I said. "I heard you together that first night." She closed her eyes and tears started running down her cheeks. But I felt no sympathy for her. These weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone who had been caught. "John," Vincent said, "I think we all need to calm down and discuss this rationally." "Rationally?" I repeated. "You want to discuss rationally how you plan to have me declared mentally incompetent so you could steal my life savings and sleep with my wife?" "It's not like that," Margaret said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Then what is it like?" I asked. "Explain to me how documenting false incidents of memory loss and transferring property without my knowledge is anything other than theft and fraud." Vincent's legal training kicked in. "John, I think you're misunderstanding some complex financial planning concepts." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone and played a recording of their conversation from the previous week, where they discussed moving my retirement funds into accounts Margaret could control. The blood drained from Vincent's face as he heard his own voice discussing the legal mechanisms they would use to gain control of my assets. "Where did you get that?" Margaret whispered. "I've been recording everything for weeks," I said. "Every lie, every false incident you created, every plan you made to destroy my life. I have it all documented." Vincent stood up. "I think we should leave, now." "Sit down, Vincent," I said, and something in my voice made him comply. "We're not done here." I looked at my wife of 37 years and my son-in-law who I had welcomed into our family with open arms. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to go home and start packing, because tomorrow morning you're both going to discover that there are consequences for trying to destroy an innocent person's life." Margaret looked up at me with desperate eyes. "John, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can fix this." "Fix what, Margaret?" "The fact that you've been cheating on me for months. The fact that you tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. The fact that you've already started stealing my property." She had no answer for that. Vincent made one last attempt to regain control. "John, I understand you're upset, but you need to think carefully about what you're accusing us of. Making false allegations could have serious legal consequences for you." I smiled at him, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Vincent, I'm 64 years old, but I'm not stupid. I know exactly what I'm accusing you of, and I have the evidence to prove every word of it." I stood up and walked to the door. "You have until tomorrow morning to figure out how you're going to explain this to Sarah, because after that, it's out of your hands." As I left Dr. Harrison's office, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Powerful. They had thought they were playing chess with a confused old man. Tomorrow they would discover they had been playing with a master. I didn't go home after leaving Dr. Harrison's office. Instead, I drove to James Morrison's office and spent the rest of the afternoon finalizing our plan. By evening, everything was in place. Tomorrow would bring the end of the longest chess game of my life. That night, Margaret and I sat in our living room like strangers. She had tried several times to start a conversation, but I wasn't interested in her explanations or excuses. The time for talking had passed months ago when she decided to betray our marriage and conspire against my freedom. Around 9 o'clock, Vincent called. Margaret answered on speakerphone, probably thinking I was too defeated to pay attention to their conversation. "How bad is this?" Vincent asked without preamble. "I don't know," Margaret replied, her voice shaky. "He knows about us, and he knows about the guardianship plan." "What about the recordings he mentioned?" "I don't know what he has, but Vincent, he's not the confused man we thought we were dealing with. He's been playing us this whole time." There was a long silence on Vincent's end. "We need to get ahead of this. I'm going to call Sarah and explain the situation. Maybe if we control the narrative." "What narrative?" Margaret asked desperately. That we tried to have her father declared mentally incompetent so we could steal his money. That I've been cheating on him with her husband? We'll figure something out, Vincent said, but he didn't sound convinced. After he hung up, Margaret turned to me. John, please, can we talk about this? What would you like to talk about, Margaret? How long you've been sleeping with our son-in-law? How you forged documents to make me look mentally incompetent? Or how you transferred our house into a trust without my knowledge? She flinched at each accusation. It's not what you think. Then what is it? She was quiet for a long moment. I never meant for it to go this far. Which part? The affair or the conspiracy to steal my life? The affair just happened, she said weakly. Vincent and we connected. You and I had grown apart, and he understood me in ways you didn't. So you decided to have me declared mentally incompetent. That was Vincent's idea, she said quickly. He said it would protect everyone, protect you from making bad financial decisions as you got older, protect me from being left with nothing if something happened to you. The lies kept flowing even now. Margaret, I heard you two planning this. You were an active participant, not some innocent victim of Vincent's manipulation. She started crying then, but I felt nothing. These tears were about being caught, not about the pain she had caused me. What do you want from me? She asked. I want you to pack your things and leave. Tonight. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. She cried harder, but I walked upstairs to our bedroom and started gathering her belongings. 37 years of marriage, and it came down to this. Me packing my wife's suitcase so she could leave to be with her lover. The next morning Margaret was gone. She had left sometime during the night, taking only the clothes I had packed and her jewelry. No note, no goodbye. After 37 years, she couldn't even muster the courage to say the words. At 10 o'clock, James Morrison arrived at my house with a team of attorneys and investigators. At the same time, similar teams were arriving at Vincent's law firm and at the house where Margaret was presumably staying. Are you ready for this? Morrison asked. I nodded. More than ready. The first confrontation happened at Vincent's office. Morrison had arranged for the police to be present when we served Vincent with legal papers documenting his participation in conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and legal malpractice. I insisted on being there to see his face when his world collapsed. Vincent was in a meeting with clients when we arrived. His secretary tried to stop us, but the police officers made it clear this was official business. When Vincent emerged from the conference room, his confident lawyer demeanor evaporated the moment he saw me standing there with Morrison and two detectives. Vincent Morrison, one of the detectives said, you are being served with a warrant for conspiracy to commit elder abuse and fraud. Vincent's face went white. This is a mistake. I haven't done anything illegal. Morrison stepped forward with a briefcase full of evidence. We have recorded conversations of you discussing plans to have Mr. Holloway declared mentally incompetent through falsified medical evidence. We have documentation of your research into guardianship laws and competency hearings. We have proof that you helped transfer property without Mr. Holloway's knowledge or consent. Those were legitimate estate planning discussions. Vincent protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Estate planning doesn't typically involve fabricating incidents of memory loss or hiring investigators to falsify family medical histories. Morrison replied calmly. The detective handed Vincent the warrant. You'll need to come with us for questioning. As they led the Vincent away in handcuffs, I felt a satisfaction I hadn't expected. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice for what they had tried to do to me. The second confrontation happened that afternoon at Sarah's house. This was the one I was dreading most. Vincent had been arrested, Margaret had fled, but Sarah was still my daughter. Despite everything she had done, I still loved her. Morrison and I arrived at her house around 2 o'clock. Sarah answered the door looking haggard and confused. She had obviously been crying, probably since Vincent's arrest made the local news. Dad, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Is it true? Which part? I asked, stepping into her living room. All of it. What they're saying about Vincent, about the guardianship plan, about Mom. I sat down across from her, noting how small and young she looked despite being 28 years old. It's all true, Sarah. She started crying again. I didn't know it would go this far. I thought we were just being cautious, planning ahead. You thought having me declared mentally incompetent was being cautious. Vincent said it was normal estate planning. He said lots of families do this to protect aging parents from making financial mistakes. Morrison spoke up from beside me. Sarah, we have recordings of you discussing your father's supposed symptoms with your mother and Vincent. You participated in creating false incidents and coached conversations to support claims of his mental decline. Sarah looked stricken. I was trying to help. Help who? I asked. Help me or help yourself inherit my money faster? It wasn't about the money, she protested, but the words sounded hollow even to her. Then what was it about? She couldn't answer that question. We sat in silence for several minutes while she cried, and I tried to reconcile the woman in front of me with the little girl who used to sit on my lap and tell me about her day at school. Finally, Sarah looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. What happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices, I said. The district attorney will decide whether to file charges against you for conspiracy and elder abuse. That's out of my hands. Will you forgive me? The question hung in the air between us. Could I forgive my daughter for participating in a plan to steal my freedom and dignity? Could I forgive her for helping the two people who should have protected me most in the world? I don't know, I said honestly. Right now I need you to understand something. What you did wasn't just wrong, it was evil. You helped the people who were supposed to love me most try to destroy my life. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. Do you? Do you really understand what you did? You helped them document fake incidents of memory loss. You lied to doctors about my mental state. You participated in transferring my property without my knowledge. If we hadn't caught you, I would have spent the rest of my life in a memory care facility while you spent my money. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry isn't enough, Sarah. Sorry doesn't undo the betrayal. Sorry doesn't give me back the months I spent thinking I was losing my mind. Morrison and I left Sarah sitting in her living room, crying over the wreckage of her marriage and her relationship with her father. I felt sad for her, but not guilty. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. 3 weeks later, the legal aftermath was still unfolding. Vincent had been charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and legal malpractice. He would likely lose his law license and face several years in prison. Margaret had been charged as a co-conspirator and faced similar consequences, though her lawyer was trying to negotiate a plea deal. Sarah had cooperated with investigators and received immunity in exchange for her testimony against Vincent and Margaret. She would avoid criminal charges, but her marriage was over and her relationship with me was permanently damaged. I sat in my lawyer's office, signing papers to reclaim my property and close the fraudulent accounts Vincent had helped Margaret open. Everything that had been stolen from me was being returned, but some things couldn't be recovered. Trust, love, family. Once broken, these things didn't heal easily. What will you do now? My lawyer asked as we finished the paperwork. I had been thinking about that question for weeks. At 64, I was starting over. No wife, no relationship with my daughter, no family to speak of. But for the first time in months, I felt free. I'm going to sell the house, I said. Too many bad memories. I'm thinking about moving somewhere warm, maybe Florida or Arizona. Sounds like a fresh start. That's exactly what it is. 2 months later, I was sitting on a beach in St. Petersburg, Florida, watching the sunset over the Gulf of Mexico. I had sold the house in Ohio and bought a small condo near the water. For the first time in years, I was living for myself instead of trying to make other people happy. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Sarah, her first attempt to contact me since Vincent's trial had concluded. Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I think about what I did every day. I'm sorry isn't enough, but it's all I have. I love you. I stared at the message for a long time, watching the waves roll onto the shore. Maybe someday I would be able to forgive my daughter. Maybe someday we could rebuild some kind of relationship. But not today. Today I was content to sit on this beach and enjoy my freedom. The waiter from the beachside restaurant approached my table. Another drink, sir? Yes, I said, smiling at the simple pleasure of making my own decisions. I'll have another. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. Margaret and Vincent had tried to steal my life, but instead they had given me something I hadn't had in years: independence. They had tried to make me disappear, but instead I had found myself. At 64 years old, I was finally free to be whoever I wanted to be. And that felt like the greatest victory of all. The game was over, and I had won. Not because I had destroyed them, but because I had refused to let them destroy me. In the end, that was enough. I raised my glass to the darkening sky, toasting the future I was finally free to create. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, new adventures, new reasons to be grateful for this second chance at life. But tonight I was content to sit here and enjoy the sound of the waves, knowing that I had fought for my freedom and won.